His kiss began gently, hesitantly, as if giving me a chance to change my mind. But when I responded, when I leaned toward him, his touch grew more assertive, more demanding. Lucas's hand slid down to my waist, pulling me closer. The kiss deepened, igniting a fire within me, a passion I hadn't felt in years. Every touch, every movement, was like a jolt of electricity, sending waves of pleasure coursing through me. My name is Amelia, and I am 65 years old. 40 years ago, I married Daniel, the man I eloped with when I was just 20. He was everything I ever dreamed of, kind, passionate, and adventurous. My parents didn't approve of him, and they made their opinions very clear. But I didn't care. I was young, deeply in love, and willing to leave everything behind to be with him. Now, as I reflect on the years, I sometimes wonder if they were right. Don't get me wrong, Daniel has always been a good husband. Together, we built a life filled with love, laughter, and 3 wonderful children. Our kids are grown now, married, with families of their own, scattered across the country. It's just me and Daniel in our old house, a place that feels far too quiet for 2 people who once thrived on chaos and adventure. Over time, the silence has grown louder. We still love each other, but something has changed. The fire that once burned brightly between us has softened, replaced by a steady, predictable warmth. Sometimes, I find myself yearning for the spark we used to share, a passion that now feels like a distant memory. I remind myself these feelings are normal, something every couple faces after decades together. Then, last night happened. It began like any other evening. I was in the kitchen, making Daniel's favorite stew. The aroma of garlic and herbs filled the air as I stirred the pot, my thoughts drifting to our children. I wondered if Emily, our eldest, would visit for Christmas this year. Just as I was about to call Daniel for dinner, the doorbell rang. Wiping my hands on a dish towel, I went to answer it. Standing on the porch was Lucas, Daniel's younger brother. What does Lucas's unexpected arrival mean? Why is he here, and could his presence be tied to a secret that has been buried for years? This isn't just a surprising reunion, it's the doorway to unraveling a story full of twists and revelations we never saw coming. What mysteries are waiting to be uncovered? Before we dive deeper into the truth behind this moment, take a second to hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and leave a like to stay updated on every unfolding detail. Daniel and Lucas couldn't be more different. Daniel, with his steady presence, his calm demeanor, was my rock. He was dependable, grounded, someone who could always be counted on. But Lucas was a force of nature. Unpredictable, magnetic. His smile could light up a room, his gravelly voice always carried that edge of mischief, and there was a raw energy about him that drew everyone in. Even at 30, there was something intoxicating about him, something that left you wanting more. Lucas. I gasped, my heart racing in my chest. What are you doing here? Amelia, he said, his lips curling into a boyish grin, his eyes twinkling with that familiar mischief. Is this really how you greet your favorite brother-in-law? I laughed, though my breath caught in my throat, stepping aside to let him in. Before you freeze, I muttered, trying to act normal, but everything about him felt electric. Lucas brushed the snow off his coat, then looked at me with that same mischievous glint. I'm in town for work and thought I'd drop by. Hope I'm not interrupting anything. His voice trailed off, and I couldn't help but notice the way he was watching me, like I was the only person in the room. Not at all, I said, trying to sound casual, even though I felt anything but. I led him to the living room, where Daniel would be thrilled to see him. But even as we walked, the air between Lucas and me felt charged, like static before a storm. As Lucas settled into the chair, Daniel walked in, his face lighting up at the sight of his brother. The two of them embraced, laughing like it was the most natural thing in the world. Their energy filled the room, and for a moment, I felt like an outsider in my own home. They shared stories, swapped old jokes, and drank wine, filling the space with warmth. But even as I smiled and joined in, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting. Something I couldn't quite understand. After dinner, Lucas leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing playfully. "Amelia," he said, voice low and teasing, "do you remember the time I taught you to dance?" I couldn't help but laugh, the memory flooding back. How could I forget? I stepped on your toes so many times, you couldn't keep count. "Hey, I wasn't that bad," he protested, a mischievous glint flashing in his eyes. Daniel, sitting across the room, smirked. "You were terrible, Lucas, but at least you were persistent." Lucas shot him a playful glare before turning back to me, his gaze intensifying. "All right, Amelia," he said, standing up and extending his hand. "Want to see how much I've improved?" Before I could protest, I found myself standing, my hand in his, my pulse quickening. I glanced at Daniel, who was watching us with a knowing smile, his eyes dark with something unreadable. "Let him show you, dear," Daniel said softly. Lucas led me to the center of the room, and as the music began to play, his hand was warm in mine. I could feel the tension in the air, a magnetism pulling us closer. The way he guided me through the dance, his touch firm yet gentle, sent shivers through me. Every move was graceful, effortless, and for a moment, it felt like the world had faded away. His eyes never left mine, his gaze so intense it made my breath catch. It was as if he could see right through me, and I didn't know whether to pull away or lean in. As we moved together, the rhythm of the music seemed to synchronize with the pounding of my heart. I could feel his body close to mine, every subtle shift of his weight sending a thrill through me. His presence consumed me, and for a fleeting moment, it was as though we were the only two people left in the world. When the song ended, I pulled away, my chest rising and falling as I tried to steady my breath. "You've definitely improved," I said, my voice betraying the rapid beat of my heart. I forced a smile, trying to push the sudden heat from my skin, but Lucas's smile lingered. His eyes were fixed on me, and there was something in that gaze, something I couldn't ignore. I turned to Daniel, who was sitting back, his face a mask of confusion, or maybe something more. I couldn't tell. But I felt it, the shift. Something had changed. And even though I couldn't pinpoint it, I knew it was more than just the dance. That night, as I lay in bed next to Daniel, the silence between us felt heavier than usual. I had barely closed my eyes when Daniel spoke softly, his voice even and calm, as though he had been holding this question in for a while. "Amelia, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, turning to face him, but my mind was still on Lucas, on everything that had just happened. Daniel hesitated, his words coming slowly, carefully. "Do you ever miss the excitement we used to have?" The question hit me like a sudden wave, unexpected and raw. I had to admit, I was taken aback. But maybe it was a question that had been lingering for a long time. Something I wasn't ready to face. I stayed quiet for a moment, pondering. Finally, I nodded, my voice almost a whisper. "I think it's normal to feel that way, after so many years." But even as I said the words, something inside me wondered if I was lying. Something had shifted, and I wasn't sure I could go back. "I just want you to be happy, Amelia." "Truly happy," Daniel said, his gaze soft but deep. "I am happy," I replied, though my words felt hollow, as if I were trying to hide something inside. Daniel sighed, his hand reaching out to hold mine, squeezing it tightly as though he were conveying something important. "I think it's time we try something different, something to reignite the spark," he said, his expression determined yet gentle. "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. He looked at me, his expression both serious and strange, then he spoke, each word hanging heavily in the air. "I want you to spend the night with Lucas." The words lingered, almost unbearable in their weight, yet unmistakably clear, leaving me breathless. My eyes widened as 100 questions flooded my mind, each overlapping the other. Did I hear that correctly? Is this a joke? But when I looked into Daniel's eyes, I knew he was completely serious. "Daniel, I don't understand," I whispered, my words struggling to break free. "Why would you suggest something like that?" "Because I love you," he said simply, his voice soft yet sincere. "And I want you to feel alive again." I stared at him, torn between doubt and curiosity. The idea seemed so absurd, even scandalous, but a part of me couldn't deny that it stirred something deep within, something I couldn't ignore. The weight of Daniel's words settled on me, and I realized that this was just the beginning of a story I never thought I'd be a part of. At first, Daniel's suggestion sounded so ridiculous that I wanted to dismiss it immediately. But as I stood there, clutching the bedspread to my chest, I couldn't deny the flicker of something inside me. A curiosity, a hunger, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. My heart raced, a mix of fear, guilt, and excitement pulsing through me. Was this madness? Or was this the chance to rekindle something inside me that had been dormant for far too long? I fought to keep my composure, breathing deeply, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to unfold. A few moments later, Daniel returned, and this time, he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was Lucas. I sat up quickly, clutching the bedspread to my chest as though it could shield me from the storm brewing in the room. My eyes darted between the two men, my mind struggling to process the heavy weight of the reality I was now facing. Lucas entered the room with a slight hesitation, his hands buried in the pockets of his jeans. No longer wearing a coat, he was dressed in nothing but a simple shirt that hugged his broad shoulders. His tousled hair and confident stride made his presence feel like an electric charge, filling the room with an undeniable intensity. When our eyes met, my heart skipped a beat. There was a warmth in his gaze, a tenderness, but beneath it, something darker, a raw, magnetic force that left me breathless. He wasn't smiling now. His expression was serious, brooding, and so intensely captivating that I had to look away, my face flushed with heat. "Amelia," Daniel's voice cut through the tension, calm and soothing, yet carrying an undercurrent of something far more intense. He stepped forward and sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes never leaving mine, his expression unreadable but full of quiet determination. "Are you okay?" I nodded, my pulse racing, though my shaking hands betrayed the unease I was trying to suppress. "Daniel," I whispered, the words trembling on my lips, "are you absolutely sure about this? Is this really what you want?" My heart hammered in my chest, but I couldn't hold back the question, the need to hear him confirm this madness. "Yes," he said, his voice steady, but the softness of his tone sent a shiver down my spine. There was no hesitation, no doubt, just the certainty of his words, and that, more than anything, set my mind spinning. "It's your choice," he said. I hesitated for a moment, heart pounding, before nodding, barely able to whisper, "Okay." My voice was so soft, it barely registered. Daniel stood up, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze before stepping back. My eyes widened. "Daniel." He smiled gently. "It's okay, Amelia. Trust me." But instead of leaving, he pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, his gaze never leaving us. My heart raced as I shifted my eyes between Daniel and Lucas. The tension in the room felt thick, an undeniable mix of curiosity and heat that hung in the air. "Daniel," I whispered, clutching the bedspread to my chest. "What is he doing?" Daniel sat still, his expression calm, but intense. "I want to stay," he said simply. "I want to see you happy, Amelia. I want to watch you let go, to rediscover the parts of yourself you've buried for so long." His words sent a shiver down my spine. I turned to Lucas, who was watching me closely. He reached out, his hand gently brushing mine. "Are you okay with this?" he asked softly. I hesitated, my heart hammering in my chest. The room was charged with an energy I couldn't explain. Finally, I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas sat on the edge of the bed, his movements slow and deliberate. I watched him, my breath shallow, as his hand reached for mine. His fingers were warm, firm, grounding me in the moment. "You're amazing, Amelia," he said, his voice soft yet intense, the weight of his words lingering in the air between us. "I'm here to take care of you." His words sent a tremor through me, vibrating deep inside my chest. As he slowly reached up to tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear, his fingers brushed against my skin with such care, almost reverently, that a shiver raced down my spine. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I couldn't move, the air between us thick with unspoken tension. Lucas's gaze locked with mine, intense yet calm, as if he was giving me the space to choose. When he spoke again, his voice was a soft whisper, barely audible. "Amelia." His breath ghosted over my lips. "If this isn't what you want, just say the word." I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart thundering against my ribs, louder than I ever thought possible. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of something I couldn't control. My breath was shallow, rapid, as if my body had already made the decision, even if my mind couldn't catch up. Instead of pulling away, my body moved toward him, closing the gap between us. My lips met his, tentative at first, as though we were both testing the waters. But when I responded, when I tilted my head and leaned in closer, I felt a shift. His kiss deepened, growing more demanding, more urgent, and I couldn't pull away. Every inch of my body hummed as his hands found my waist, pulling me even closer. The heat between us intensified, making my skin burn where he touched. I felt alive, every nerve in my body firing, awakening something long buried. The passion that had once felt so distant surged within me, flooding every inch of my being. The kiss was no longer soft, but a hunger had taken over, and I couldn't get enough. Every touch, every shift of his body against mine, sent electric jolts straight through me, igniting something deep inside. I was drowning in the sensation, his lips, his hands, his presence overwhelming every part of me. When he deepened the kiss further, pulling me into him with such force, the world around us disappeared. There was only Lucas, and the fire that was burning between us. My heart raced, but it wasn't fear, it was pure, unfiltered desire. I could feel the years of restraint, of living in a haze of comfort and predictability, crumble away in that moment. I felt something inside me, something long forgotten, spark back to life, raw, unbridled, and undeniable. For the first time in ages, I was truly awake, truly feeling, and I couldn't pull back, even if I wanted to. I melted into Lucas, feeling the warmth of his embrace, the way he whispered my name as if it were a prayer. As the hours slipped by, I realized something I had never understood before. It wasn't just about rekindling passion, but about rediscovering myself, the woman I used to be before life and routine dulled her edges. Daniel shifted in his chair, the sound pulling me momentarily out of the moment. I glanced at him, my lips still tingling from Lucas's kiss. Our eyes met, and Daniel's expression was gentle and encouraging. "It's okay," he said softly, "I want you to feel this, Amelia." His words dissolved into the air, erasing my final hesitation. I turned back to Lucas, whose gaze met mine with an intensity that made my pulse race. His hands moved to my shoulders, his touch steady yet tender. His eyes roamed over me, drinking in every detail, and I felt a mix of vulnerability and excitement under his gaze. "You're incredible," he murmured, his voice husky with emotion. His hands continued their slow exploration, tracing the curve of my shoulders and the line of my collarbone. Each touch seemed deliberate, sending sparks of heat through me. Lucas leaned down, his lips finding mine. This kiss was deeper, more urgent. His hands slid down my back, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us, our bodies pressed together as one. I felt Daniel's presence in the room, but instead of unsettling me, it heightened the thrill. Knowing he was there, watching, made every touch, every kiss from Lucas feel more forbidden, more intense. Lucas's lips left mine, trailing a line of kisses down my neck. His hands roamed everywhere, gliding over my arms, my sides, and my waist. He moved slowly, savoring every inch of me. His lips found a sensitive spot just beneath my ear, and I exhaled a soft gasp. My fingers tangled in his hair, and I breathed, "Lucas," my voice trembling. His hands slid lower, tracing the curve of my hips, pulling me closer. His movements were deliberate, unhurried, yet filled with passion and reverence, as if I were something precious to be cherished. I glanced at Daniel again, seeing him watching us intently. His expression was calm, but there was a warmth in his gaze. He gave me a slight nod, a quiet affirmation that steadied me even as I felt myself being swept away by Lucas's touch. Lucas's hands moved over my body, as if learning every curve, every contour. His lips returned to mine, the kiss deeper, more demanding. My hands moved instinctively, gliding over his chest, feeling the heat of his skin through the fabric of his shirt. "Amelia," he whispered against my lips, his voice husky with desire. His hands continued their exploration, each touch igniting a brighter flame within me. His lips followed with kisses, tasting me in a way that made my entire body tremble. Daniel remained there, silent but steady. His presence was a grounding reassurance as I surrendered myself completely to the moment. Lucas's touch was everything I had craved, gentle yet fervent, respectful yet utterly possessive. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. My senses sharpened, each touch, each kiss sending waves of pleasure through me. His hands continued their exploration, and his lips sought mine again and again, each kiss more intense than the last. I felt his breath warm against my skin, each moment burning deeper into me. The entire room seemed to spin in a whirlwind of emotion. I blinked back, the tears welling in my eyes, overwhelmed by the depth of his love and acceptance. Daniel wrapped his arms around me, pulling me into a tight embrace that made me feel safe, cherished. In that moment, I was enveloped in his warmth, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat calming the storm of emotions swirling within me. When he pulled back, his hand lingered on my cheek, his thumb gently wiping away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. "You are everything to me, Amelia," he said softly. "And you always will be." The three of us lay together on the mattress, the tension and excitement of the night fading away, giving way to a quiet, shared intimacy that felt profound and comforting.